Okay. Welcome to this council briefing, Wednesday, 3rd of July, 2024. I just want to note some apologies. One from Ron Mendelson, who's got the flu. It's online, I believe. Thank you. And that's all.
Councillor Williams.
Oh, and for Councillor Williams too, who can't make it today. Okay. Before we go into our first item, I'd like to ask Councillor Gordon Lambeth to talk a little bit about this wonderful sitting in today for the first time.
Yeah.
So I'll hand the floor to Lambeth.
I'll stand up. Yeah. Welcome everybody. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all here today because of this this magnificent building that we've got here. Just to give you a quick rundown of what happened, I don't know if anybody was Stephen Sharp last night, but it had the rugby game between the Scourge, which is Tangawahine over there, and play Tangaroa here. And it's an annual game that we have for what we call the Tito Cup, very much a social event. The oldest player of the day was playing out there. He played a full game. It was Charlie Parkinson, who was 72 years of age, and he played a full game. So if you get a chance, go back and watch that. It streams online. Jason informed me that it was old people's TV, but we can get there. Just to give you a brief history about this place. Originally in the foyer there's an old Mama Engel has painted a watercolour there many years ago of the old hall when it was just over there on the main road. And in the 80s, it was realised that that wasn't adequate for our district. And so a lot of the farmers and people of the community got together and decided to build a new complex. It was absolutely incredible what they did. They milled timber from their farms. They did things like chopping firewood and selling it. They hunted turkeys and sold them at the markets. A lot of things they can't do today, but basically they raised the money and over a 4-year period they built the complex and it became the centre of this community. The pub closed, the churches closed, everything retracted back to solely the community hall here. And then in January in 2020, the most horrific thing happened where an arson attack took place and it burnt to the ground and it really ripped the whole heart out of the community. There was grief because a lot of those people had given it, a lot of the people who had built the place had passed on, but there was some that were still present. So we were given the job of rebuilding it. We got a payout of just under $3 million for it. So we were a cash customer and then COVID struck. So during that process, and I'm just going to tell you how we managed to get around it and we built this complex. The big thing was that we had to do it exactly to provide what our fathers and grandfathers had done. We built it to exactly the same square meterage and we tried to provide all the same facilities. Because we're a cash customer, and COVID striking, the construction industry was very, very tender at that stage. And we put it out for 3 design and build quotes. They came back all very much the same, but we ended up with Ryco who did the design and build. They were prepared to do it at cost because all they wanted to do was survive the next year through COVID. And this was about using a bad time as an opportunity. One of the biggest problems we struck was we had a $350,000 blowout with the foundations, which was unexpected, but we managed to get this complex built within budget. There were a couple of things that were outside of it, but because we were 90% complete, we managed to get the funding for it. This community here does not get any funding externally. It runs this complex from its own means. And it is really a model that we want to follow if we can. At lunchtime, I won't hold you up anymore, but at lunchtime what we'll do is we'll go through and I'll give you a quick guided tour around because there's some things that are unfinished. We've got the picture theatre screen up there in the centre hall. We've got an international squash court out the back, which came out from the Czech Republic. There's a small gym down the back. You probably had a look at the commercial kitchen, the bar running there. We have our conference room here. This is our lounge. It can all be opened up. We've had a funeral here already 3 or 4 weeks ago where the whole place was filled up. We did have our hurdles. One of the things was with the storm events, after numerous pestering, we tried to get the culverts fixed out there and they weren't. And as a consequence, our car park got flooded because of the poor maintenance of the culverts. That's put us back quite a bit. We'll probably end up getting around it. But
Who did you call?
Ghostbusters.
Oh,
They're just scary here, and we're on the same wavelength here with our humour. But anyway, so welcome to our complex. We're very, very proud of it. Alana, I hope, will contest it. There's all the fancy Wi-Fi and everything here. It is available. So if you want to have meetings with people and want to meet midway between Dargan and Whangarei, this is always available to use. So welcome and enjoy yourself today. Thanks.
well done, mate. And mate, at the committee. Pride.
Yeah, great result for the community. It's a pleasure to be here today. Right, our first item on the agenda is Transport Alliance operations briefing. I welcome Calvin Hudd.
Morning, Dakota. Just before we start, I'll just cover off a couple of points that have come through either from last meeting or come through since sending out the agenda. So firstly, the quarry info requested, Bernard sent the info through to Alana this morning. So that'll be distributed through to you. And so we had a request from Councillor Williams just regarding project status report where we had Tomarata Road Bridge repairs project cancelled. So Councillor Williams was just confirming that that is the Inslee Street Bridge. So it is the Inslee Street Bridge. So the background of that was staff, when the recommendation from the bridge consultant came through for those repairs, staff were cognizant that we'd done some major works on that bridge within the last 5 years. So they challenged those repairs, got a second opinion, and they were minor of nature compared to others in the network. So those repairs have been deferred and the budget was used on other more urgent bridge repairs. So there's those ones. And I believe those were the only questions. They were the ones we received. Yes, please feel free to raise them through. In terms of the update, so yeah, May saw a real further step up in audits being undertaken. Obviously, with the stage the contract was at, we were really focused on making sure that things were being delivered as expected. So there were almost 50% of the ordered works were audited. So 10 failed of that. When an ordered work fails, then that invoice for that dispatch is put on hold until the work itself is the defects are rectified. So that was worked through. About 20%, which I believe is a record for routine works, were audited, and we had 60 disappointingly failed audits for that. What we've seen over the last few months, as we reported last month, the Ventia contract coming to an end and them losing staff and those sorts of things, both the quality and completion have dropped off. That is evidenced in the contractor performance graphs. So, sorry.
So just on that, thanks, Calvin, just on that, with that 67 failed, as you say, that's a concern, and understand your rationale. What has been done to rectify those?
So when they fail, they return to the contractor to rectify. It may be a fail for ordered works, could be the fact that they haven't picked up a pothole that they should have. So it does depend on the type of failure. So if our guys go through an audit and identify that through their routine inspection they haven't identified a defect, the first step is for our staff to raise that defect.
Yeah.
But then, which triggers the lump sum repairs.
But so going forward, you know, I mean, Ventia moving out, is it still on them to make sure that all of these jobs?
So it's on them for the good works. For the lump sum works, there is a mechanism because they are more inspections and the likes. There's a mechanism to review the payments made to them for those periods.
So you can take money back.
Well, it's as part of that monthly claim process.
Yep.
So it's not so much going back later and taking it, it's assessing it as part of the monthly claim for May.
Or can it be funding go forward to Downer, for instance, to do those jobs, to get them done?
So the funding for maintenance and operations cannot be carried forward over a 3-year cycle, past the 3-year cycle. So we just finished the NLTP period. So maintenance and ops funding does not get carried forward as part of the subsidy funding. So in that respect, you can't carry that forward.
So it's
What it does mean is council's local share, if we haven't paid for those components, council has the ability to carry forward, so you can uptake more subsidy if you haven't got the same local share.
Yeah. I mean, the consideration must be that those jobs are completed by the people that were meant to do them as much as possible.
So the closeout of the contract is done in accordance with the processes of the contract. Everything associated with the claims and final sign off and everything is ultimately signed off by Blair as the engineer to contract.
Yep.
So it's all done through the mechanisms within the contract. I'm not completely across every minute
No, that's right.
detail, but Blair has been across the steps and working with Downers.
I think that from my point of view, what I'm trying to say is that we would prefer that there's a clean slate moving.
So, as I understand it, Ventia completed their obligations on the network, bar a couple of little things that tidy up Sunday.
Okay. Thank you.
It's probably answered my question. Have they got a partial small contract with the new operation or not?
And would need.
Okay. If they did, was there any intellectual stuff that they can be recontracted for? If that was the case, they would be or not?
I think that's probably, sorry, it is, but I think that's probably more yours.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Ventia are still on our subcontractor panel. And just sort of clarifying Councillor Howard's question, the engineer of the contract does have to issue a certificate 6 months, I think it's 6 weeks after the completion date, which was Sunday. But part of that completion certificate will be making sure that the full obligations of the contract are completed, plus any outstanding works that still require work. So even though their contract is finished, they're still obliged to continue finishing the works.
Thank you.
Just,
Councillor Knight.
thank you. It's just a corollary. I echo the sentiments expressed by fellow councillors. I think even if we can't have a time frame, I'm just wondering about those phase 3 works which were awarded to them and they will be done not this year, maybe second or something. What happened to those contracts and subsequent claims they may raise on those?
So through the chair, the phase 3 works are separate tendered items. So those
They will stay with Ventia?
So they have yet to be tendered. So as we've reported, and there's an update in here, the phase 3 works we've received the designs for the first 8 of them. We've gone out to tender to get the designs for the other 7. Now that those designs are received, the construction of those slips will be tendered on the open market for repair.
So Ventia can be part of it?
Ventia can choose to tender if they wish for those jobs. Some of them are specialist piling type jobs, which aren't probably in Ventia's or Downer's normal skill set. But they'll go out to open market through your normal procurement process. They're above 100. They're estimated to be above 100,000. That's what's put them in phase 3. So they'll be open tendered.
Thank you.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, we did have this conversation at last council meeting where we're going and developing a panel with Whangarei District Council, which the council agreed to. So they will be the bidding will be part of the panel once the panel is established. But to get to the panel will be a public process.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Mr. Mayor, are the acoustics good?
I aren't. Not the one that asked in my hearing. Not too bad, but I would ask you to speak up. Yeah,
No, just that there's no echo and it's really good.
We come here all the time.
Raise your voice a little bit more.
oh dear, caught out there.
That's part of the plan. It's just your joke.
Moving to so as a result of those quality issues that were identified, the at-risk contractual payment for the month was a score of 104, which is underperforming at the low end of underperforming. So there was no, so you remember last month, I think it was 45%. That's continued to trend down and there was no at-risk payment made for the month of May. We move on to emergency works. So in the phase 2 program, there were 309 individual tasks, about $900,000 worth of works undertaken. That included 16 dropout slips across 12 roads and 280 culvert clearance or flushing on 32 roads and about 5 dangerous tree removals that were completed. The remaining low complexity slip repairs remain on at the end of May, remained on track to be completed by the end of June. We do understand there are a couple outstanding. They will be have to form part of the contract with Downers to take those phase 3 ones when they come through. All remaining works, as I mentioned before, of the 15 phase 3 sites, we've got geotech investigation and design completed for those 8, so they will move into that panel process. And we've got the work issued to the geotech consultants for the investigations. Excuse me. On the unsealed network, the grading has picked up through May and definitely through June in preparation for winter. We're doing the blanket. Yeah. So at the moment, we are in the process of doing a full network blanket grade in preparation for winter across the entire unsealed network. Unsealed rehab works continued at Poto Road, Koremau Road and Tamaire Road, with Kurikopani being undertaken in June. And then there was continuation of the focus on drainage works with water channel and culvert pipe replacement and culvert end clearance through May, continued through June as well. And in customer requests, we are continuing to see a reduction in the number of customer requests received, so down to 174 in May from a peak of 301 in February. Also, through that reduction, the team have been able to focus on clearance of historic ones, so we've now managed to get the open requests 103, which is a 28% reduction. Generally, we target an open rate of about 50% of a total monthly received volume. So we're definitely, with 174 received and 103 open, we're getting much closer to that level and the closest we've been since pre-Gabriel. And I think that is it.
Question.
Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice photos and everything. You have mentioned a lot of work on Black Swamp, Kames. I'm just wondering, and always do, you did have Hokianga Road disabled ramp construction, which is such a minor job, not even to be reported. Do you have any inkling for us of the jobs pending in Dargaville? But I don't see any work being done there. So is it the process, or there are quite a few items for Dargaville? I don't see anything here being done.
So through the chair, if there are specific defects, then they would need to be raised through a CRM. The work program is done at a district-wide level based on the priorities of the defects identified. As I understand it, through the commencement of the new contract, there will be a full defect validation process happening over the next 3 where the programs are developed and to identify what's happening. If there's an area of specific concern, the best idea is to raise a CRM so we can make sure that it gets.
Sorry, my question is clear. I haven't seen any water tabling being done in Dargaville. I have not seen any other things of significance in that area. And there are a lot of works which is in the your RAM schedule, and I can give you a list of that. But I'm just thinking, do you have any work in progress which we can hope to be achieved in this area?
So through the chair.
Not maintenance, some constructive work.
So through the chair first, in May, there was completed on 437 of Kaipa's 701 roads. We could provide a list of what roads they were on if they're requested. In terms of construction work, any major projects that are identified, whether it's low cost, low risk, or low cost, low risk, bridge upgrades, anything of that nature, the funding for those projects for the next 3-year period will not be confirmed in the National Land Transport Plan until September. So in effect, between now and when that funding is confirmed and reported back to council, the works that continue are any projects that were already in flight and any continuous maintenance programs that we've been provided indicative funding for. So in essence, there will be no significant projects starting until October. What we are doing, because we've got indicative funding for both the renewals and the bridges, is identifying the program for the coming construction season based on that indicative program, so that when the funding is confirmed, the contractors are ready to.
I understand. So I take it that everything is done, nothing is pending, but thank you.
Through the chair, just to confirm, as we've reported previously, there is a massive drainage defect in all Northland networks. So there is not a state of everything is done. What has been completed is what has been funded and issued to the contractors under the available funding.
Okay, councillor Lamberth.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. My first one relates directly to page 2 of the presented document relating to the Northland Road Safety Trust. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm the KDC representative on this trust. At a recent Automobile Association meeting, we had the national office up, and the Mayor of Whangarei and councillor from the far north informed me that our funding is stopped. I've still been trying to get to the bottom of who actually stopped this funding. And my question is directly to you. Did you stop it?
Through the chair, firstly, to clarify, staff do not have the power to stop funding. The funding is part of the NLTP funding application process. So in normal circumstances, in every previous year, when councils receive their indicative funding for continuous programs, it includes the road safety education. In this year's funding, it was specifically noted when those continuous programs came out that they weren't providing the indicative funding for the continuation of road safety programs, and that would be confirmed in September when all the funding was confirmed. We have since, all councils and LGNZ have since lobbied NZTA and said this is not a tenable situation because we have existing ongoing contracts and resources, and they need a level of certainty. Last week, NZTA came back and confirmed that they are now re-looking at the continuous program funding for road safety education, and councils should expect to get some form of indication in the next week or so of what that continuous program funding is. So this is purely a Waka Kotahi NZTA board decision about what they provided councils with indicative funding. I think what came through was that it wasn't to be funded. That was not technically correct. What they said was funding would be confirmed as part of the rest of the program in September. That was not tenable for anyone who has their road safety programs contracted to external parties.
And just to add to that, if I can, Mr. Mayor, so obviously there's a 3-month window there, and I understand that The other councils have agreed to continue their funding. Our portion, KDC's portion, is quite small. So they didn't actually even bother to ask us because it's quite small. But we are continuing to fund. It's not being.
So just the risk to council, the councils have a local share component. The risk to councils of doing 3 months is covered within that local share should it have eventuated that there's no funding. So both Far North and KDC, as Jason said, proceeded with that continuation.
Thank you very much. And to hear it with all three of you here clears it all up today. The next question I've got may be a little bit more difficult. 2 months ago, you said publicly that a councillor had threatened some of your staff. You didn't name the councillor, but it put all us elected members under the spotlight by not naming them. You said you're going to do an investigation into it. Have you completed that investigation? And if so, what was the result of it?
Through the chair, I think I'll direct that one to Jason.
Thank you, Calvin. So yeah, we had a look at that actually, and it is completed. There is no outcome that needs to be reported.
So the accusation that it was a council member that threatened, is that being withdrawn?
There was a difference of opinion, I believe, between what was said and what was not said. So it couldn't actually be actively resolved properly.
Because I'm publicly getting asked, was it me?
Well,
And I'm sure other councillors.
it's up to you how you respond to that.
No, but there is when you lay an assertion like that on an elected member and it's not named or it's not resolved or it's not withdrawn, that allegation remains there.
Maybe you should talk to your fellow elected members about their behaviour.
So, Mr. Mayor, from my perspective, yeah, it's completed. It's we've moved on.
Okay, maybe we can have further discussions about that with the CE. Okay, thank you. All right. Councillor Howard, you had a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. Thank you. Calvin, we know that, and I know that this is moving forward. We know that we've had the indicative information from NZTA that we're going to be about $20 million down potentially on our roading works, for the next 3 years. What are you hearing across the country in terms of the reductions against requested? Are we line ball? Are we more than, less than?
So through the chair, as a whole, no council has got what they've asked for. That is probably, as usual, the fund is oversubscribed. The Northland councils as a whole, including Kaipara, have got a significant step up on previous, which is a reflection of both the changes of escalation catch up and the desires of council to step up core areas. We have seen is Kaipara's was moderated down slightly more than Far North and Whangarei. We have yet, until it's finalised, we will not know why. It's basically Whakatahi, as part of their assessment, look at both what the business case is, the AMP that supports the funding. Now that business case is the same for all three, but is also that they apply a level of confidence in terms of deliverability. So there is that component in there in terms of.
That's on that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, following up on Mike's question, this 20 million which we are talking about, are they specific projects? Is 8 million of Dargaville includes in this 20 million?
So through the chair, the indicative funding that's being provided is for specific functions.
Yes.
So those specific functions are your district-wide maintenance activities.
Yeah.
They are not specific to any area. They are for your district-wide renewals and rehabilitation activities of the sealed and unsealed network, and they are for your district-wide bridge renewals program. Any specific projects that fall under low cost, low risk outside of that are individually submitted and will not be confirmed until September.
So that doesn't include 20 million. That 8 million is separate, because in RTC submission, I remember when we were sending it, that 8 million, which was we were already not progressing for the footpath in Dargaville, all I'm asking is that 20 million constitutes that 8 million as well?
So through the chair, the 20 million difference between what has been indicatively approved and what is in the council LTP is solely related to those activities I said. The 8 million that you're referring to was the Transport Choices submission. That was submitted bringing forward future projects out of the LTP, which were for future years. That was included in the RLTP draft because it was at that stage had been approved funding and was continuing through the year. Since that time, as we've reported previously, that funding has been withdrawn. We've been able to do the small project in Dargaville, but there is no request moving forward, either in council's LTP or in the submission to NZTA for that funding in this 3-year cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Larson.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thanks for the information about the aggregate. What is the difference between a standard rehabilitation and a Page Green rehabilitation in terms of what actually happens? So some of the roads you've identified as having a Page Green. Is that not correct? You look confused, Kelvin.
I'm going to defer to Bernie because I don't think there is a difference. But
No. So through the chair, there is no difference really. So Page Green, as mentioned at previous briefings, Page Green in itself is not a specification. It's not a defined specification. Page Green is a window in which we apply our aggregate specification within. Page Green, as far as our unsealed rehab sites, you could say most of our aggregates and most of our activities comply within the Page Green somewhere. We generally refer to our wearing course material more within that defined Page Green table. And that's where you may be hearing there's some differences in the treatment. So it's more the treatment selection on the ground, whether we're applying a wearing course or not.
I think through the chair, just adding to that as well, as we've said previously, what was known as the Centre of Excellence methodology, or the full unsealed network rehab methodology. What you do have is areas where we have gone in and done that methodology in totality, which includes all the associated improvements and everything else, versus other areas where there's been a lesser form which may just be or anything else. So all that treatment selection is based on the assessment of needs, the ground penetrating radar, the start on the base course and everything else, and balance of available budgets. So, yes.
So in what situation would you be doing an unsealed rehabilitation and not apply a wearing course?
Through the chair, generally our very low volume roads, based on usage, those that generally have 1 or 2 residential properties most and are heavily targeted for forestry activities. Those are the sorts of roads where it wouldn't be practical for us to put a wearing course down. Much easier for us to maintain without a wearing course.
And so what is the surface like when you don't apply a wearing course? Is it just, what are you applying?
So through the chair, we're talking more a base course without the wearing course applied on top. We still get a well-compacted homogeneous pavement. It's just a matter of ease of maintenance. It's a lot easier for us to get a grader in on a higher frequency to maintain a surface where just the base course material is applied, heavy traffic loading, than it is to undertake the same effectively for the wearing course.
So what size aggregate are you using, and is that the GAP 40 base course?
Generally GAP 40.
Okay, thank you. I've been asked a couple of questions recently, and I know it probably falls into the as yet unknown NLTP basket that Kelvin's referred to, but I've never heard any suggestion that it was going to be upgraded, and that was Henry's Bridge on Cove Road, but I was asked about it. That's never been on the list for any.
Through the chairs, the indicative budgets for bridge renewals and upgrades has been provided. I don't actually have.
That's all right.
Of individual bridges.
So, one that you might know about, because I know a number of years ago, I thought it was on the list for laning the 50 Max Bridge, which was the Kakaroo Bridge on the Kaiwaka Mangawhai Road. Do you know off the top of your head whether that's that fell off the program for some reason, and I don't actually know why.
I'll have to find it.
If just by email, that'd be great with both of those bridges. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Bernard, just going back to the point that you related there to Councillor Larson regarding the lesser material put on lower usage roads, you know, and you did use the phrase is that there's more grading, you know, a higher frequency of grading. Are we, is it a, you know, a fool's paradise here? Is that, you know, in terms of a cost, and okay, it's all part of the overall cost portfolio, but are we better to put the better material on once and have less grading? I mean, are we working against the ultimate that we're looking at here in terms of efficiency and best use of the budget?
Through the chair, and Bernard can talk to the technical specs, but as part of the development of the rehabilitation program, there has been a classification of roads determined and an appropriate treatment for those. That's based on whole of life costs, not just maintenance costs. The idea of that is to have over time, as these are treated at that defined level, KDC's maintenance costs will reduce. One of the potential contributing factors to the funding that's been provided to KDC at present is don't complete your rehabilitation program in line with those specs that have been agreed with Wakatai and in the timing that's in the NLTP. They see a detrimental impact on the maintenance cost reduction moving forward. So it's about how you balance those. Where Bernard referred to it was low residential volume, but high forestry.
Yep.
And that is where, irrespective of what treatment you do, you're going to have damage to the road. So where the ease of maintaining that road is beneficial.
Yep, through the chair, pretty much nailed on the head there. Yeah, high agricultural forestry usage. Generally, we see under the heavy traffic loading, a GAP 40 product base course material performs better under that loading. Whereas if we do put down a GAP 25 constructed course layer, it really doesn't perform well under consistent heavy traffic loading. Whereas it's brilliant under light traffic loading and actually extends the life of the pavement.
Okay. And if I may, Mr Mayor, I got one other additional question, and this is in the papers, but not in your section. It's in the LTP section, but I think that you guys would be the best to answer this. It's under road safety. It's on page 54, and it's talking about the nature of Northland roads, but by inference, upper roads, and fatalities and serious crashes that we know happen throughout Northland. So my question is, what do we know of the causes of fatalities in the Kaipara district over the last 18 months?
Through the chair, every single fatality on the local road network is investigated by both the police and an independent road safety expert engaged by council. The majority of those, and this has been reported a number of times by Anne-Marie Fitchett, who is the head of road policing in Northland. About 70% of road deaths in Northland are primarily attributed to RIDS, which is restraints.
I'm asking very specifically on Kaipara.
So through the chair, to understand and provide that information, we'd have to go back and get the information for every single, for each one of them. That's not something we have on the.
Okay, so it's not something that you.
But the Kaipara trends in terms of accidents are equivalent to the Northland trends from what we've seen.
So road conditions,
So Anne-Marie has quite clearly stated to RTC on a number of occasions, from a policing and fatality perspective, road conditions are one of their minor concerns compared to everything else.
yeah, thank you, thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
If I can, through the chair, if I can just elucidate based on that, I can tell you that most fatalities are due to driver's behavior. Out of 19, 12 were out of driver's behavior. And road condition play very minor or insignificant role.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, just before we start the next item, we'll just get Anna to tidy so we can upload the presentation online. So she'll just do that real quick.
I just want to make one statement regarding the accusation of impropriety by a council member to the rating people. I think your comment, Erin Wilson-Collins, actually exemplified the problem when you said someone should talk to the member. All members have told me that they haven't abused anybody to the point that it should have been a complaint made about their behaviour. And I'd like to see us have a statement that identifies that that's the case, because it hasn't gone any further. And it should be recognised that there wasn't a breach that was sufficient to bring a complaint. So that's what I'll be talking to my CEO at some point after this meeting.
And just to clarify, I said members, meaning us as a collective, should perhaps have a discussion about it, is what I was referring to.
So, Councillor Larson.
I wasn't going to say anything, but you have. And I support what Councillor Lambeth has raised, because a public accusation of impropriety has been made. No one was named. Leave it up in the air. That needs to be closed off with a statement that it says an investigation has been carried out. No elected members been found to do anything wrong with the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Just checking with Alana now. How you going there?
This would be a big one.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, Tracy.
How exciting is this? Now have a physical version of 18 months' work. But I have two copies here. One is the track change one that you have. I'm hoping that wasn't too tricky to go with. I just thought it'd be easier for you to be able to find every little change that we'd made, every change we'd made that wasn't a typo. But I have a new clean version, so if you've struggled at all with trying to understand what it actually reads underneath, I can reread. You just tell me the page. So Today, it's just really to show you what your final document's going to look like. We've not been able to give it to you in this form. What you'll recognise hopefully is that this is all your source documents now put together, the ones that went out for consultation with the consultation document. And it's been amended to reflect what you discussed in the deliberations and decided. So that's as far as this has come. You'll note there are no changes in here from your decision at the 26th of June council meeting last week. Those still have to be processed. So there's a bit of change in there, and it does impact potentially policies as well, possibly the activity of roading. So there is a bit more to come, but really at this point, what we're trying to do is just correct. We can tweak wording if you think it doesn't really reflect what you were trying to say in something. We can correct facts, and we can correct any errors that you can see. There have been changes also more recently, which we'll incorporate, and I think Councillor Williams had sent in some changes relating to that, and she's correct, and it references generally to things such as NTA or those kind of things that we need to go back through and find based on any of your other recent decisions. But other than that, is there any feedback? Any comments? Questions? That's perfect. Nearly.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very sorry to put it away. No, look, it's just a simple one, and it goes to page 203, land value, second step considerations. Where we're talking about looking at going to capital value. I read somewhere during the last week that another council has adopted capital value as their form, but they instituted a 50-50 factor balance between land and capital. I thought, okay, that's interesting. One could ask why, but probably it's just looking at balance. So, I mean, I just raise it as a query. When we get to talk about that, we're not going to talk about it now because it's there for the future, but it was just interesting that I can't remember which council it was that it had looked at an option there.
Yeah, that won't affect this LTP, but
No.
I will, I know you're doing an investigation now based on your deliberations that will bring that to the annual plan process.
Yep.
No problem. I've made a note.
Putting it.
Just transfer it forward to the annual plan process. Thank you, councillor.
Part of their work, if I could, Mr Mayor, is that we will look at other councils, what they've done most recently too, so we can see. Don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just in lines with Councillor Howard's, I mean, it would be great to have a hard copy specifically columnized in terms of targeted and general rate, getting the revenue from, because I'm just concerned more on projects like which were supposed to be targeted rate ended up in general rates. So that kind of error I want to avoid. So it'll be great to have that kind of, just for example, I shouldn't say Mangawai wastewater. I mean, there's anything which is targeted rate ends up in general rate is a blatant error, and then it'll affect the rates very much. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So what you'll find is that you'll see a whole lot of blank pages with headings on them. Those would have come to you had we not made a change in our at our recent council meeting.
Okay.
So what will come to you next in the final version will be all the financials, tried to have in our LTP, plus all the rating, and it literally you can see the maps already, but it's quite specific. You'll see in the last LTP how detailed that is. That'll all come to you in your final version at the council meeting for adoption.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I think, Tracy, because it's such a large document, seeing as there's a lot of work gone in both by staff and from councillors and from public submissions. What we're seeing here is quite a large document that takes quite a bit of absorption and reading for members. So and from that point of view, if there's something that stands out to members, please email, voice your concerns or otherwise. Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to set expectations, yeah, so we'll provide in the final document to the council meeting in July for adoption. We are still, as a staff, going through our last minute changes and edits as well. And as you've heard, we still need to reflect decisions made last week too. So a lot of work to get through here. I just want to set expectations. Editorial changes will be fine, and please just email them through to Trace direct if you could, if you have any as well. But we won't be changing wording and stuff that doesn't reflect decisions that are made. So we'll be very careful about that also. A lot of the changes you've seen in the document are as a result of decisions you've made at the deliberations, such as the climate topic. We've adjusted the LTP as a result of that. And with the reasoning around that is because you've made a decision now, so we need to reflect that in the document. So just want to set expectations there.
Councillor Howard.
Can I make a statement, please, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a huge thanks to all of the staff and all of the elected members for an incredible amount of work. I mean, it's been an 8-week, I think, period, and it's been full on. To me, it's as a newbie, it's given the best possible insight I could have had to the operations of council and understanding so many things that otherwise we may not have seen. I won't suggest for a moment that I understand it all at the moment, but I think that there's been an amazing amount of work, an amazing amount of insight, and not a small amount of angst and concern in getting to an ultimate position. But we couldn't do it without the wonderful support and engagement of the staff. And I think that I've got, and I'm only saying it for me, I've now got a much better understanding of the whole scope of council, and I'm very pleased to have been through the process for it. Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions or something to say? Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Do you have?
On that note, thank you, Councillor Howard. I'm going to ask Sue and Anand to now and talk to you about the decision that was made last week. Technical things we're going to need to tidy up. Completely understand the intent around your decision, which was to smooth the rates for 8.9% years 1, 8.9% in years 2, and 8.9% in year 3. As you recall at the meeting, we did write that report in less than a day, and the original recommendation would have allowed that, although it was changed without agreement at the meeting.
Thank you.
It didn't have the impact that you were after. So we just need to walk you through that. Thank you so much, Lana. And look at options to fix it because we understand the intent of what you wanted to achieve. So I'm just going to hand over to the team now to walk you through this handout.
So what will we bring to you on the 31st when you adopt the LTP will be an adjustment, because when we looked at the meeting we had last council meeting, I was under the impression we could reallocate from year 1 to year 2. Year 3 was the only amount it was about 395,000 that was actually going to be out of the picture. It's actually the total of those, which is the 8.9 million, which is the subsidised amount. So the gross amount of roading that's you want to come out to get to your 9.8% before growth and 8.9% for each year. So I'll be bringing a resolution, part of the resolution of the LTP, to just make sure we are doing what you wanted to do. So the effect of it is that before the last meeting, we had roading in at 103 million. The 8.9, to get down to 8.9% after growth on all 3 years, the total gross roading needs to be 94 million. You'll recall that we had a paper going last time that said NZTA had given us an indication for the renewals and operating expenses would total 81 million. So we're still in between, you know, well in between. So there's no real issue. We haven't been given the final amount. It's bound to be less than what we think, but we hadn't recognised what NZTA had given us as an indication in the LTP, but we're still going to be down 8.4 million on what we told you last week. And so, and apologise for that. That was just because of we had to do the resolution quite quickly.
Councillor Larson.
And so ultimately on that indicative funding, we'd be down another 13 million beyond that 8 million once we get confirmation from.
Oh, well, it could be more, even more than that, because they haven't given us the indication on capital either.
No.
So scenario one, councillor, is
What was recommended?
what's recommended, not the amended recommendation. And so the difference is $13 million
Yeah,
between
you're
the
right.
two. And if we take our 38% subsidy, it's $5 million.
Okay.
And the difference between scenario two is $8 million of non-subsidy. So $1 million every, so it's 3 million delta. So we had that conversation around, you know, we'll continue to put what's in the LTP, noting that the indicative funding may come, will be coming September, October. And then in September and October, council needs to make the decision what we do with our $5 million of unsubsidised funding that we've waited for.
Yeah, sure. So we could end up with up to 5 million approximately of rates revenue that we can't match with subsidy.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And that provides that 0.8 profile.
Yeah, thank you.
And I followed by Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I get it right, what I understand is the information provided to us before the decision was different from what transpired now.
So we put forward a report. Yeah, sorry. Go.
So I get that. I think what I'm more concerned about, the elected member and the mayor making about-face decisions, because there is a way around. There was a lot of money which we are carrying forward in district leadership. $1 million from there would have brought it back to 8.9 or whatever we decided. So I think, I mean, people will have to have respect in our decisions that we are making decisions based on good figures. We should not be going back on these decisions on small financial figures. So I would really like you to work around those carry forwards and try to come back to the figure we were comfortable with.
So
just a request, and if the members agree, yeah.
So through the chair, my understanding was that the mayor rang round the councillors the night before to see that they agreed with the decision that he wanted to make, which was to smooth the rates to 8.9%.
Yes.
There was no indication they wanted to use one-off funds. The only area we're using one-off funds, which are retained earnings, which I think are being used almost fully on the one-off Cyclone Gabrielle. So that is where other monies that we've got is to back up some of our financial reserves and depreciation reserves, and we don't want to use those to supplement operational costs.
Well, I understand that, but I am very, very concerned about council making roundabout things on little matters which can be resolved. The depreciation reserves, we decided that we should not go, we'll go 50%, so you can go 45%. Not going to change the hell of a thing. Things like that. I mean, in the amount which we are carrying forward, based on that, we will be spending so much on digitization, 100,000 there, 200,000 there. There's a $750,000, which we're just presuming we'll be spending. So I think you can work around and come back to the figure we decided is very easy. But I leave it to other members.
You, Mr. Mayor, if I could, look, we've got to stay on track here with this particular conversation, if we could, Councillor Nair. And just reflecting, the council made a decision at the last council meeting. So we're just trying to tidy it up so it's technically sound and correct, which is which is what we're doing today, and what Sue's outlining to you as the next steps to make your decision that you wanted the reality. That's what we're doing today. It's not the end of the world, yeah? You have technically made a decision, and we just need to make sure we get that decision right ahead of adoption of the LTP so that you do smooth the rates, and it's 8.9% for all 3 years, and that's what's outlined in front of you today.
And through the chair, we can't make any more changes. We just haven't got the resources to change a 300-page document.
What I would say, if I could, Mr Mayor, I'm very sorry. So we're taking a leap of faith here. We're going to get some direction from you today because we need to finalise the rates. We need to finalise the LTP document based on that decision. And then what Sue's saying to you is ahead of the LTP adoption report, there will be a technical report where you'll make a decision in line with what we're outlining today for you. And then adoption of the LTP, which will be prepared based on the intent that you decided at the last meeting. So there's a leap of faith for us here.
Yep.
And then we'll strike the rate after that. That's the process moving forward, if you agree with that today.
Thank you, councillor Vincent, followed by councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I'm certainly not going to be one to relitigate what we've already decided. I'd like to understand the information we've got in front of us better. And so I was just wondering if you could just walk us through box by box as to where we're at. I think I get that we're talking about roading in particular and both capital and maintenance works.
Renewals and OPEX, operational maintenance.
That's capital and maintenance, isn't
it? Just sticking to definition, the capital component from NZTA will come later on in the year. And this is, the renewal is capital, but it's not the full capital.
Very good.
So
that's really helpful.
We don't control those buckets, Mr Mayor. Those buckets are controlled by NZTA.
Yeah, okay, but just if we can, if you could just walk us through each section so that I can get a better handle on things, because I think around the room we're generally agreed that as to what the objective is, as the mayor set out, and he did ring around the night before, as you said, Sue, and so I think we have a common understanding of where we want to end up, but it's just a question of how we get there. And if you, I'm not understanding it just as yet, if you could just walk a bit more in detail, please.
So I'll start, councillor, through you, Mr Mayor, and it's important that you sort of have to go back to the paper that was presented last week, because it had the original recommendation in the final resolution. So this paper sort of sets out what changed and the impacts of that change. So for ease of elected members, we've numbered the line items down there. So if you did want to query anyone, you can point us to an exact number. But if we go through box 1 to 4, that's what happened at the end of our deliberations. We ended up with 10.8, 14.4, 4.9. We'll come back to boxes 5, 6 and 7, but that's just the original allocation of our gross expenditure, which is the NZTA subsidy as well as the council portion as well. And that's what Sue referred to in terms of 103, what we originally had.
That's including the FAR?
Yes. Yeah, and the rates funded portion of that is 39 million for our portion.
Yep.
I see that number 39.
You can see it fifth line down.
Oh, it's on the next.
Line 7.
Yep.
And then lines 8 to 15 is the original resolution, sorry, the original recommendation, which provided the smoothing of the rates from 10 to 9.8, 14 to 9.9, 4.9 down to 9.9. And it was the recommendation in the paper which says, and there's A, B, C, D, E. And if you take B, for example, it says a reduction of 1.15 million gross, right? So what the recommendation was is a reduction. What occurred at the meeting last week was a reallocation. So 16 to 24 is the council agreed as a resolution last week. So as a result of the reallocation, and then the reduction of 395 in the year 3, we end up with 9.8, 10.8 and 14.
So as staff, what we've done is we're preparing the LTP on the first part, because that's what you wanted as scenario 1, because that's what you wanted the smoothing.
And so we need to basically just redecide
Well, you just have to have it,
on that day,
change the
resolution.
recommendation.
Back to what it was.
Yes.
Can I,
So what we'll do, so Councillor Wilson Collins, sorry, before we ask a question, is that we'll bring, as I said before, bring a report back. It'll likely be that you change the recommendation back to the original that was recommended to enact what you actually wanted to do. And we'll do that ahead of the LTP adoption item. So you do this technical report, agree it, adopt the LTP, then set the rates, that order, and then we'll be all tickety-boo. Actually, yeah, that, like I said, requires a leap of faith from us, and that we will draft the LTP ahead of that, with your decision in mind, ahead of the technical remedy of it.
okay. So just to clarify, what we thought we were trying to do was reallocating funds. That doesn't actually get the result that we thought it was going to get.
No.
We actually needed to do what was recommended by staff and actually reduce the funding. So just remind me again what, because we're saying 8 and 13 and 5 and so what's the figure? What's the reduction of the roading budget?
So
8.9 million gross.
9 million.
Whereas I advise you, it was likely to be, I think, 395,000 just year 3, but in actual fact, it should have been the reductions.
9 million.
Yes, that's gross,
What do you mean by gross?
as in,
Including FAR.
That's, yeah.
And councillor, don't forget also that the councillor last made the point at the start of this conversation that the indicative amount that we're going to get from NZTA Wakakate is 20 million less anyway.
Anyway,
So it's kind of a
Academic.
point in academic, yeah, you're quite right in some ways because of that.
so just,
I mean, that's,
and can I just,
Yeah.
what I'll add to that is if you look at that last line, which you've got marked as number 14, you'll see in the last year, we're going to be spending 38 million. And when you look, so our expenditure is increasing. So we are getting the level of expenditure basically in year 3 that we wanted, but it's not the extra. What I think we thought was that all of the money was going to be spent in year 3. But it's not. We're actually getting up to the level you wanted, but we're not doing the work, the same amount of work, although we'll be doing a lot more operations work, with Cyclone Gabriel, because there's another 20 million of that in our LTP.
so just to clarify, the last thing I just want to clarify is the NZTA funding that's indicative to be 20 million less. What if they turn around, like, it's probably extremely unlikely, I know, but if they turn around and can provide that funding and we don't have it in our budget, what's the effect?
That, I think that'll be okay. We'll come back to you on what the implications are. And that did happen last time. Not that they went to what we had in our budgets, but they increased it over what their indicative budget was.
So if I can just complete my little segment here. That's okay, because that's been helpful. I'm just reflecting on the comment you made earlier, Sue, about the amount of headroom we've got in effect created by, I guess, our original aspirations and what the NZTA has indicated we're likely to get. And so we've sort of anticipated to some extent, but there's still the possibility that there may be some extra money in the pot, and we'll still have the money there available for local share to pick it up to some extent.
At the moment, we have, if it's over the indicative values that they've told us, yes, we will have some extra in the pot.
We requested 105.
Yeah.
85's what they offered, I guess it's an offer, isn't it? But application, putting in that could change. Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Just a clarification, Mr. Murray, you made a good point. So I guess those 20 million shortfall came after we have done the discussions, so that gives about 7 million anyways.
There was another report on the agenda last week.
Yeah.
No, with that.
So, I mean, in that case, we are not changing much. Thank you.
Clarification, I think, just want to point out to elected members that if we were to get the 20 million, it would have to be moderated down to our portion that we've put in our LTP. So it won't be the full 20 million.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of our profile, we're spending 23, 32, 37. That's on the basis that we will contribute 5 million of unsubsidized funding.
Okay, councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The workings and machinations of numbers. So the bottom line is, Sue, that all going to come back to us as 8.98.
Yes, that's what you'll see in the.
That's the clarity, even though in scenario 2, we're at 9.8, 10.8 and 14.
No, we didn't implement it.
No, so that's cool. I think that I would like to go back to this matter and clarify this whole matter of unrealised retained earnings, because I think that it's been a key element about reducing the rates. And notwithstanding the veracity of what was decided last week, we have I've got a question coming, but to Councillor Nayer's point, or actually to push back on Councillor Nayer's point, we have used, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Sue, that we've used all we can of what's the term? I'm forgetting the term now. Unused income, retained earnings, all we can realistically already in reducing our rates. Right? There is, I think you alluded to it before, there is nothing left. There are contributions and things like that we have. We can't touch those. So in terms of cumulative effect of rate increase on top of rate increase that hasn't been used, and expended, we've used everything we could to reduce the rates this year.
So that more or less, I'll have the final figures because I'm anticipating figures to obviously the end of June, and we haven't got the final figures. So there might be a few 100,000, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll take that direction and we will bring that report to you at the July council meeting ahead of the LTP adoption, and then we'll set the rates at that point.
Okay, we're going to break for a cup of tea. Thank you all.
10 minutes, Mr Mayor?
Yep.
10:45.
Quarter of an hour? I like 2.
How?
Okay, we'll reconvene this meeting Wednesday, 3rd of July, 2024. Next on our agenda is the draft road naming policy, and that'll be presented by Lloyd Barton. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Good. So, look, the purposes of this morning is to give you an update in relation to the draft road naming policy. There is a handout that should be on your table. That is attachment which is attached. So it's no change. I've just highlighted, you'll see some yellow and blue highlighting just to help keep track of the changes as we go through the presentation. Yeah, so thank you for the feedback that we did receive on the draft. Purpose of today is to obtain further feedback, go through the changes with you, pretty much line by line in terms of the feedback that was received to date. And, you know, we did receive a considerable amount of feedback and substantial changes have been made. And hopefully we're sort of closing in on the target here, and but appreciate your feedback in terms of that. The idea is to report back to council at the end of the month and get it signed off. Just for context, the current policy, you'll recall, dates back to 2017. It lacks a bit of detail and it's timely to review it. The earlier draft was presented back on the 17th of April. And as I said, lots of feedback. The amendments are largely in line with that feedback. There are some, there's about 3 areas where my recommendation at this stage is retained and not make the change, but, you know, do that respectfully. And I'll explain the reasons why I haven't changed it in terms of recommendation anyway. Highlighted is council's decision and policy, and council may make further amendments. Before getting into the detail of the amendments, just go over the statutory aspects. That is the Local Government Act 1974. There's three sort of important points there. Section 319 does give council the power to name and alter the name of any road. That is public roads. There's another section, section 315, defines what a road is, and it actually excludes private ways. So a private way is commonly a right-of-way or a jointly owned access lot. There can be a number of people, private ownerships of that access way, but it's private. It's not, as opposed to, you know, being a public road vested in council. And in relation to private ways, because of the way roads are defined, which do not include private ways, councils has limited powers in terms of naming of private ways. So that's an important bit that we've learned since the first draft. The next one is a bit of sharing of responsibility and powers here for road naming and road numbering. The Surveyor General does have powers under the Act, under the Local Government Act, to change road numbers. So they do have some influence, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of where we end up in terms of road names and road numbers. There's also standards. Important point here, they're not mandatory, and that was picked up in terms of some of the feedback, pointing out that it's not mandatory, and that is correct. You know, it's a bit of a hierarchy we've got here. We've got the legislation at the top and council's powers, then flowing down into standards and guidelines. There's a New Zealand Australian standard for rural and urban addressing, and then there's the Surveyor General and LINZ have another guideline. It's a bit like a guideline to explain the New Zealand, the Australian New Zealand standard. One of the important points there is the guidelines limit street number prefixes, that's, you know, the A or whatever, to 5 letters, A to E. So for any given address, say it's 10 Park Avenue. Linz will issue, if that lot's developed, they'll issue further addresses 10 Park Avenue A to E, but they don't go further. Okay. And this has a bit of bearing on the private way issue. I think I understand the reasons for that is if you go too far down the alphabet, it gets a bit more difficult for emergency services to locate a property. Linz maintain a national database of all the road names and numbers, and they distribute them out to central government agencies, to Google Maps, etc., and things get updated through that system. So yeah, it's really a bit of a joint responsibility and a bit of cooperation between territorial authorities and Linz and the Surveyor General. Now, just going into the details of the feedback. So just the PowerPoint just sets out the main themes in terms of the feedback. Then I'll go through, made the changes, and I'll point that out in the actual draft. As I said, it's probably easy to follow the handwritten has the changes highlighted. So the first bit of feedback was, I guess, around making it explicit about council's powers, and it is council, in other words, elected members that make the decision. And there's been changes. Policy now states that the final decisions rest with councils, and by council, by definition, in the policy there, it's elected members, not council staff. So those changes are at paragraphs 1.1 and 5.1. Then the next feedback was about really the hierarchy of council's decision and how that sits with the, as I said, the standards. So there have been changes made, basically referring to the Australian New Zealand standard as a guide only. That is on 1.3. And so it should be section 8 draft policy. Not section 4, it should be section 8. So that's at the top of page 281. So that's hopefully getting more of a balance between, conveying what council needs to consider without unduly restricting, what applicants can apply for. But I think that was a concern with the previous draft. It was being too restrictive in terms of restricting what applicants put application in for.
Clarification.
Councillor Nair, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification. So these highlighted areas, are you adding it or deleting it?
The yellow.
No, the bluish.
The blue ones is the text. So I should explain that. The blue is where I've retained the text, so it hasn't changed. So I just want to be transparent in terms of what's changed and what hasn't changed.
Okay.
So yellow has changed, taking on board the missions. The blue is I haven't changed it.
Okay. Thank you.
The next feedback was around the subjective matters, and they're really in section 8, and it's to do with avoiding insensitive words, offensive names, ambiguous names, etc. So we just made the change here, really make it clear it's council's opinion. It's no one else's. It's not council officers. It's councillors' opinion that applies. There's also another change. The feedback was what is submitted to council for approval is up to the applicant. So I guess the issue there was not, trying to dictate to applicants what they apply for. And again, there's been a change there. Paragraph 9.1, that last sentence on page 281, just making it clear that the final decision on whatever an applicant applies for is up to the applicant. Next one was how can council maintain, the next one was about, the question was how does council maintain signs on private ways? the previous version said that council would maintain signs on private ways, and of course we can't because we're on private land. So the policy's just been amended there to make clear it is council maintain the signs if it's on council road berm, so on a public road only. That's at paragraph 12.3. The next one was around potentially regulatory overreach in terms of overstepping the statutory obligations. And this comes back to, as I understand it, the issue around private ways. In the previous draft, we had the naming of private ways over 6 lots required. But going back to the definition of roads, and that a private way is not defined under local government as a road, it is correct, we did overstep the mark there, and I've had to pull it back. There's a bit of a conundrum. We still want to make sure that if you have over 6 lots, you know, residents do end up with road numbers on their properties, and we're not in this sort of no man's land of road numbers not being allocated. So the wording has now changed. It's at 6.2 on page 280, that developers are encouraged to name private ways where it's over 6 lots. So I think that brings back a bit more balance to it and ensures council stays within its sort of statutory lane. The next feedback was just about short names.
While you're on that,
Yep, sure.
have a bit of a discussion around that. I thought your solution was, well, it can be a condition of a resource consent because one that creates those 6 lots coming off of private shared access. So that could still apply, couldn't it?
Yes, it could. It could. When we had a closer look at it, and the previous draft had standard condition. When we looked at it a bit harder, it's one size doesn't suit all. I think we might have to deal with it with, and it might vary depending on the circumstances, either advice notes or perhaps with the bigger applications, you could put in potentially conditions of consent through the RMA.
I'm just thinking about the ambulance turning up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
To an emergency call out.
Yeah.
And to find the right driveway.
That's right. There is a risk of that. You know, we want to do our best to encourage developers to do it. I think we can also provide some more information, for example, on our website about road naming, and, you know, make it clear that this is a goal we want to get to. We want clearly identified properties, and do it through a bit of education, a bit of
Educated with similar to an existing road name.
That's right. Yeah.
Councillor Aaron Wilson-Collins.
Just to clarify on that same point, why would we only encourage them and not require them to name it?
Because
It's something else.
good question. Yeah. It's because if we say you're required to make it mandatory, we are overstepping our powers under the Local Government Act.
Okay.
Isn't it?
Yeah, but you're not overstepping your powers under the Resource Management Act, though, are you?
No.
So if it's not, in the policy here, but it is in the templates for consents to cover that issue off, surely that's an acceptable approach, isn't it?
Yes. I just don't want to say definitively we're going to do it on every resource consent.
Hopefully the processing planner can exercise some discretion.
That's right. Exactly.
As a minor developer of my own right over the years, I've always found the most exciting part of the development is actually working out what your names are. Sometimes people come in and they settle in your subdivision and they actually want to change the name for reasons that they like. So you've got the flexibility to do that, of course.
The next one is actually one of the blue ones, about retaining. This was about, the query was about use of short names for short streets, and was that really necessary? I've recommended that be retained just for practicality purposes in terms of particularly digital mapping. It gets a bit difficult to have long names on a small screen, etc. The other one is a retention one. The suggestion was to delete the need for the outcome of consultation to be included in an application. I've retained that. That's at paragraph 7.2H. I thought it'd just be may help inform council's decision making if you know about the consultation and the outcome. The next one was around Te Reo and of symbols. The suggestion was that the policy as worded, and this is on, if you have a look at page 281, there's in blue, paragraph 8.3C. I think that the suggestion was that the exemption for Te Reo, so there is an exemption for Te Reo to use macrons in the policy. And that is simply reflecting that Te Reo is an official language of New Zealand. There was a suggestion to remove that or just make it apply to all languages. I think the downside, if you make it apply to all languages, it could get rather confusing and complicated. So I'm suggesting we retain the status quo there and just make the exemption applicable to Te Reo.
Councillor Lamb.
Through the Mayor, O'Connor, O''C, do we leave a space here and take out the macron? How do spaces work? Oh, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Apostrophe. French language.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, are spaces just as worse in the computer era as?
Yeah, it's all the standard. This is where that standard comes in. And it details all these variations on names of words you can have and set some standards. The standard it's basically giving it a bit of leeway with Te Reo. That's all it's doing. And the section of the policy is really just reflecting that aspect of the policy.
Can I just add, they're just discouraged though, they're not allowed.
Yes.
If you had a compelling, if it was the name of the developer or an ancestor or something, it doesn't mean you can't have it. They're just saying, can we try and avoid words that have symbols in them?
Yep.
For road names, except Te Reo, which requires symbols for it to be spelt correctly.
Yeah. And
You still have overall discretion. It's a good point, Councillor.
And Spanish. Yep.
You make the final call.
Okay. It's left open.
Okay.
The next one was about assistance with Te Reos, and previous version of the policy had endorsement from iwi o Hapu. As a result of the feedback received, we've amended that quite significantly. It's basically just the service is there if you want to make use of it. It's not mandatory to consult with Hapu or iwi. It's just been reworded to emphasise the services there if you want to nominate a Māori name. So it's really for information purposes only. The next one, finally, there was just questions around private ways versus private roads versus roads to vest. So there's just that section, it's section 14, page 283, just to clarify, which reflects the definitions in the Act, because it can get confusing. Private roads is often used colloquially to mean a private way, when in fact they're different things. But you've got to be in the know, so hopefully that makes a bit of a... and the other one, I removed in the end reference to the RMA conditions. As Councillor Vincent has picked up on, but it's still a tool there. But I think it was overcomplicating it and making things a bit messy in retrospect. So hopefully it keeps it a little cleaner.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Lloyd, that last point, 14.2D, paper road, can you just be what engagement does a council have, or what overview does a council have on a paper road? Because presumably it's, as you say, it's a paper road, but it is on private land.
No, it's ours.
Well, I'm asking the question. I don't know.
It is owned by council.
It's owned by.
Yeah, paper roads are basically roads that are owned by council. In the past, they must have been vested, or they can be designated in council. It's just so that they haven't been formed.
Yep, can be.
And you know, in the countryside, you get quite a few of them. People are entitled to walk down them, public car.
Okay.
But there's just so council hasn't formed them. And you obviously, you know, there's a bit of sensitivity around what you do with them, because often they're used just for grazing cattle or whatever. So you've got to, you know, act responsibility and not upset the cattle.
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On that point there, that the tricky thing is for someone wanting to use those paper roads, that they actually know where they are and they're not going to tread onto private property if they aren't fenced to the boundary. So that just I'm just going back to in the section 14, and it's something that I raised previously, for which I apologise, because that might be a complicating factor. Because you say in paragraph 14.1, road, that word has the same meaning as in section 315, section 1 of the Government Act 54, of which I've got in front of me. Yeah. And it essentially this paragraphs A to E, which different way basically refer to our public road and public. But also the reference to access ways, which are also fall within the definition of a public road, and they also need names. And we do have a handful of service lanes in Dargaville. 2 or 3 is a handful. It might be helpful if they were named as well. It's like it's not access ways, it might be a footpath. In the more in other jurisdictions where, like, okay, down in the smoke, where it is just leading from perhaps one road to another road, but it's entirely pedestrian access.
Yep. Yeah.
And it would be useful for those to be picked up in the, because it may well happen as a part of a development that either a service lane or an access way is included. So is any way of being able to adapt the policy to make reference to those as well? Or you can just add them into 14.2.
Can I have a think about that?
Yep.
And I'll come back to you and when before reporting back to council.
And when you're having a think about that, think about taking out private way, because it says, for the purposes of this policy, a road may take any of the following forms. And if we're saying that road has the same meaning as in the Local Government Act 3, then it doesn't include a private way. So have a think about that one too.
Yeah, I think it was coming from that.
Saying the policy's wider, we want to include private ways in the policy.
Yes, it was from the angle of roads, public roads.
Yes.
But if you want to name a private way, you come within the policy. So it comes to council for approval and goes through that process. But it's not mandatory for the private way. to do so.
I mean, it just doesn't sit quite right there, but
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
I'll leave that with you.
Yep.
That was all. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson Collins.
Thank you. Thank you so much that, yeah, when you read the previous policy, it was really helpful, and I think that's really clear. I just wonder, obviously I support the fact that you've left in the, really appreciate that, because there are a lot of signs being redone now.
Yep.
To add the macrons because they are incorrect, so we don't want to continue exacerbating that issue. With the Te Reo names and assistants, I'm just wondering, because I'm not a developer, so I'm not versed in the process. Is there an opportunity here for council staff to be checking that the names are spelt correctly?
Yes, there is. Yes. And we have our iwi liaison officer. And I spoke to him, and yes, he is able to assist.
Right,
with that. He's mindful, and I think Councillor Paniora the other day, at the last council meeting, was concerned about stepping in for the hapu or iwi mana whenua. It's very clear that Jack is very clear about that and not doing that.
Right.
So, it's just getting that balance.
Yeah, best practice, of course, I think would be to be checking in with our iwi and hapu because they can comment on the cultural sensitivity. But I'm mindful that I'm not an expert in Te Reo, and if I was making a decision on a Māori name, I would like to have had some extra assistance to make sure that we're not creating another Lake Tekapo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on 8.4A, you have highlighted short name should be used for short street for mapping purposes. And I'm just thinking, it's just a thought being quite well traveled in different countries. Some of the countries have chosen to use alphabets followed by a number. Like, for example, we're talking Mount Wellington, a suburb, there'll be A1 street, A2 street, A3 street.
Okay.
Rather than going into so many words and confusing. There are two Ash Road in Auckland, two Ellen Road. So if you go by that way, we have more opportunities to expand and no confusion, as long as we know which suburb we are going to. So I don't know whether we should go that far, but I've noted it in Vietnam, the same thing, and it's quite easier to follow that route. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All done? Yep. All right, thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you, councillors.
Yeah, so are we aiming for the July council meeting?
Yes, correct, yes.
So we'll bring this back to you for adoption in July. Thank you. Thanks, Louis.
Next on our agenda is item 4, the naming of the Rangi Ora Road Reserve. Mark will present this item in person.
So I appreciate you've just had a very formal presentation on road naming. Road naming policy. Serves we don't have a reserve naming policy. Take you through the proposals we put forward here. So presently we have the Rangiora Road, which culminates in it's a unsealed road, which culminates in a gravel turning loop, and there's a concreted all-tide boat ramp, which attracts quite a bit of use, and we've been having some issues with parking there. There's also hidden under the gorse and the pampas there, and it's a bit of council-owned local purpose reserve, local purpose Esplanade Reserve. So council's got a project within the next 2 weeks or so. We'll be having earth-moving machinery arriving on site, and we're going to be recontouring that site and doing the earthworks of preparation to construct everything that's in the red lines. We don't have the budgets at present to construct everything that we'd like to do on that site. So we're going to try and do as much of the earthworks as we can, and then we're going to construct everything in the red there as stage one. And then when budgets allow, we'll come back and we'll do further car parking. So the key things which we're constructing there is we're going to seal that bit of road, which is quite steep, and properly manage stormwater. We are going to install some formed car parking so that cars with boat trailers can see where is the appropriate place to park. And we're also going to include a small public toilet to users there, and also form a usable grassy reserve space overlooking the harbour. Through engaging with the community there, what the appropriate form and layout of this be. Family came forward and Little family came forward and requested if we could name that reserve after their late father, Hubbard Linnell, who farmed that land before it became a reserve vested in the council. We directed them to work with Mana Whenua, who were leading engagement with the community there on how we should form that reserve. As an engagement process that was underway at that time. So we brought that the naming proposal into that. And through that, the proposed name is the Hubbard Linnell Tai Moana Reserve, with Tai Moana being a reference to the tidal flows and the tidal currents in the harbour there. So it's the proposed name that's been put forward for the land there. At the moment, it's just referred to as the Rangiora Road Reserve or Rangiora Reserve by staff. It's not really formally named, and it's local purpose Esplanade Reserve. Not terribly usable in its current state, but as I said, very shortly we'll have earth moving equipment on site, and we're intending to do a bit of a community planting day and to up that reserve after the earth moving equipment has reshaped things and dealt to some of the weeds on the site. So that essentially is the proposal that's put forward there. The purpose here today is to seek feedback from elected members, and then we'll be coming to the July council meeting for a decision, because to formally name the reserve would require a council resolution. Are there any questions?
Councillor Larson.
I don't really have any questions per se. It's very great to see this project finally going ahead, because it's been a long time. Talking about it for a long time. Like Erin probably, do you guys remember this? Yeah. In terms of naming, I think it's good to respect the landowner, what have you there, that has obviously had a long time, and I had been approached about that naming, so it's good to see that they've come through with the ancestor name there. Only comment I would make is, I know that we don't have a policy around it, but similar principles probably apply in terms of what our road naming policy is. It is a very long name that's being proposed, and in terms of duplication, we already have a Tai Moana close in the Kaipara district, which may be a bit, could potentially be confusing, and it sounds like it's Tai Moana Reserve would be in Tai Moana close, which is not. So that's just my comments. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Yeah, just to provide the feedback. Yeah, like Councillor Larson has said, it's been a long time coming. This name seems to have been worked through with whānau and iwi, and yeah, so I've got no issues at all. I think it's an extremely appropriate name. So I look forward to making the decision in July. Thank you.
Very good.
Any further comments? Yeah, I happen to live in Tai Moana Close. So we are duplicating a name there. Whether it's material or not, I'm not sure. Rather see it be Hubbard Linnell Rangiora Reserve, because everybody that I know who flies over there to go fishing off that boat ramp, and I've done that many times, I always refer to it as Rangiora Road. So my feedback is I'd rather use the Rangiora than the Tai Moana, because it refers to the road that the boat ramp's on the end of. That's my feedback.
So
through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would say to that is, the community, they've gone through quite a process here with the family and the community, and they've come up with this name which they all agree on. I hear what you're saying. And it is your decision at the end, but I think from our perspective, we'll be recommending what the community have asked for at the July meeting.
Yeah, I'm only one person. Yep.
Sorry, I was having technical difficulties.
Councillor Paniora, you got your hand up.
Thank you. My feedback on that is that it sounds like the community has come up with a name. Unsurprising that there's been 2 suggestions to remove the Māori equivalent. But what I would say is that Taimoana is much more suited to this location than the name that you've got. So potentially looking at changing the name of your street would be more appropriate than removing Taimoana from a place that is near the Taimoana. Kia ora.
Okay. I don't think that's a possible option. And I think my suggestion that Rangiora Road, which is still Te Reo Maori, should be appropriate. That's my suggestion. Okay. Thank you, mate. Okay, next on our list is the legislative delegations review. This is to be presented by Shireen Monday. Welcome, Shireen.
Māori, kia ora koutou. So I'm presenting the Council CE delegations to Council to discuss them a little bit more in depth than maybe perhaps we managed to achieve at the last month's Council briefing. So just to recap briefly, so there's 2 elements to the proposal or to the presentation today. So it's about how Council manages Council to CE delegations. That's one thing, that's one element, that was one element of the review project, and the other element of the review project is literally a tidy up of the delegations after undertaking extensive review of the legislation, the environment, looking at other councils' delegations, and what is appropriate for Council to have delegations for staff to act if required, and also as part of that, what delegations should be removed and some decision making that should be retained by Council, and there's some recommendations for those issues as well as part of your agenda item. So just to briefly recap, delegations are par for the course for every local authority in the country. They support administrative efficiency in terms of allowing staff to make decisions on behalf of the elected members. Delegations allows Council to split out which functions it wishes to retain versus which functions it wishes to delegate. And the review project also makes sure that matters that cannot be delegated by Council, for example, the power to make bylaw, are retained with Council. So that's the process. So councillors may recall that as part of the last item and the proposed Council to Chief Executive delegations, we are proposing to follow a best practice approach as recommended by Simpson Grierson, in that rather than listing individual clauses in a piece of legislation that are delegated to the CE, that where possible, that is flipped and everything is delegated to the Chief Executive under the entire piece of legislation or rule or regulation or bylaw, and then the exceptions are provided for those matters that are retained by Council. So I've given you an example up ahead of you as an example. Those are the proposed changes to the Litter Act delegation. So you see currently what we've got is sections 8 through 14 are delegated to the Chief Executive. Proposal is we change that and say all powers under the Act are delegated to the Chief Executive, excluding certain matters that should be retained by Council. So it just flips it around. That means that if the Litter Act changes and there is a wording change, for example, in section 10 of the Act, that means the CE can authorise that change to apply to the relevant staff rather than the item being brought back to council. So it's for matters of administrative expediency to flip it around like that. Obviously, should the RMA legislative changes go through and there would be a huge change to the RMA, that would be brought again to council, for example. The RMA is a little bit different because those are council to staff delegations, but for minor changes to legislation, that allows for administrative efficiency. So that's the first element of the review and the first element of the proposal. The second element is the tidy up. So this was literally a review, a thorough review hasn't been undertaken at Kaipara since 2014. So it was timely. So the summary is that there are amendments to 38 statutes proposed. As previously mentioned, the Public Works Act is a complex piece of legislation and quite old by now. That is too difficult to do by exception because there's so many elements that should be retained by council. So it's proposed to keep those individual clauses as delegated to the CE. 28 new added. Now, I would add that for a lot of these statutes, not for a lot, but there are some statutes that may require council to act in its function as an entity, not as a local authority, but just as a function as an entity. There's a Postal Act delegation and it allows council to send something to somebody. It's a very, very minor thing and it's administrative. So a lot of these pieces of legislation are things that council doesn't have to act on very frequently at all, but they are provided for completeness. So there's some existing statutes that have been repealed. We don't need those delegations any longer. And there are 14 statutes that we're proposing to remove from the delegations. That is because either the power should be retained by council. For example, there's an existing delegation under the Bylaws Act 1910. There is no function that staff should be performing under the Bylaws Act. That's all a function of council. That should be retained by council. There are also some employment-related delegations in the current delegations. That's a function of the CE as the employer of all staff to act and make sure, for example, health and safety responsibilities are addressed. It's not for council to take that responsibility on. It's already the CE's responsibility as the employer of staff. So they're proposed to be revoked. There are some minor items that we're also proposing. So in the current delegations, unclear why, there were some specific exclusions. I understand anecdotally from staff that was a request from the commissioners at the time. Some delegations were specifically excluded from being delegated to staff, and whilst the reviewers found that the majority of those are valid, but we have excluded them from the documentation. If the delegation isn't in the delegation, it means that it's automatically excluded, that the power only sits with council. So that's what the policy says. If there is no clear delegation, the decision sits with council, or council can choose to delegate via a resolution at that time to allow for a decision to be made. So there were a few pieces of legislation where the delegation was excluded, and we're just coming back for completeness to propose that those are included in the delegations. These are minor administrative matters under the 3 pieces of legislation ahead of you. So we're also proposing to include those in the delegations to the Chief Executive as part of that review. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And any questions?
Thank you, Doreen. Any questions arising from the presentation? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was tempted to say, taking you literally, given the example you gave, but like it's sort of a middle ground in a way. Like an extreme approach would be to say the Chief Executive is authorised by this council to execute every legal requirement under New Zealand legislation that currently applies to the Kaipara District Council, except for, like that would.
Pretty much.
Yeah, a very enabling approach. And it seems to me it's entirely sensible what that general exceptions approach means. It's really interesting because there was a lawyer I knew many years ago who actually would have been an advocate of that, and obviously his entreaties fell on deaf ears with subsequent generations of lawyers. So I think it's a really practical approach, as long as our chief executive is up to handling it basis. There is the issue of subdelegation, and that's included, I guess, with the authority that we give to the chief executive, his authority to subdelegate those things. Is that right?
Correct. So through the chair, the policy, the delegations policy provides the framework for what the chief executive can then subdelegate or not subdelegate in addition to any restrictions under the legislation. So in certain cases, the legislation, for example, a delegation to a building officer who has to be suitably qualified to perform functions of that particular section of the Building Act, the CE can only delegate to somebody who's suitably qualified based on the recommendation in accordance with the BCA requirements as set out by the leader, by the government agency. So, for example, there is a restriction on that, and then the policy also provides restrictions what can be delegated.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor. You use the example there of the private property to clear litter from the property. It's all very well when things are going right, but when things turn bad or staff get down or, in an environment we're in, it's very much like boiling a frog. You don't realise the different bits of law and legislation that come in and sneak in the back door until you realise that power is gone, especially as a private property owner. It would horrify me, and I know that the chief executive and his staff will get so many complaints about the way a neighbour is behaving, and it can have effects on you, and there's probably so many complaints now in relation to that. However, that land is owned by somebody and have the right to do whatever they want to on it. So we've just got to be very, very careful of how far we move things away or back. So, yeah, it's very much a statement from me, I suppose.
Through Mr. Mayor, what I would say here, I think, is these delegations are based on statute and the law. So, the powers are dictated to us by those statute. And that's kind of the key point here. What I would want to say also is that we get updated from our legal advisors, any statute that changes, we get that updated quite regularly so that we understand when the law changes and then when the powers need to change too. So that's a key part of this as well. What Shireen's trying to do here, because the delegations review is something that you talked about when you first came into office, and we committed to doing because it's really important. It's fundamental to our work and making sure we have the right levels, the right powers to do our work. So but it is a big bit of work. That's why council struggled to update it, even though it is really important as well. And what we're trying to be here is actually quite administratively simple as well with this approach. It is a lot easier to do it this way as well. And we still have the clarity about what our powers and jobs are. So just commentary from me.
Councillor Vincent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I knew there was one other thing. Firstly, I don't want litter infringement notices to have to be authorised by resolution of council. Wanting to that. Good. But it is clear, is it, that when there is a change to legislation that with this approach that we don't need to reinstate our delegations, or is it because the delegation is a snapshot in time, So if there are changes, is that still legally valid?
So,
Would a new change be legally enforceable?
so through the chair, so, and to answer a couple of comments as well, in relation to that. So, staff who act under delegations are acting under delegations in accordance with the policy. Staff are required to act in accordance with many policies across council. So this is another thing where staff are required to meet the directive that council has provided in terms of how they do their mahi. This is just one other element. So any other policy that provides direction, council staff are obliged to work within that. So there are, just to answer that question, and as I said before, and the policy also clearly states this, that the chief executive's discretion where to report back to council on matters that are sufficiently significant that they should be brought to council. The delegation policy also clearly states that where a staff member thinks that this is, while they may have the delegation, they consider that this issue, the circumstances of this issue are such that perhaps they would prefer not to make that decision and they want to, I was going to say kick the can upwards, but if they recommend to their manager and their manager recommends to the CE, that is potentially a decision that would be brought before council because the staff member recognises that the circumstances that are prevailing are such that this matter should be brought to council. So to answer that, where there is a minor change to a piece of legislation, it might be a minor wording change to one of these sections of the legislation that means that technically would mean without structuring them these way, we would have to bring that item back to council to amend it. This way, we can amend the CE to staff delegations to accommodate that minor wording change or a minor addition. Where anything significant changes in legislation, then it would be the CE's decision because the CE would be authorising any such changes should they get a recommendation from a manager. It is the CE's job to look at that change and say, no, this is substantial. This is a substantial change in what the current delegated authority is because of the legislative change, and we're going to take this to council. So the authority always sits with the chief executive to make sure that appropriate matters are reported back to council for legislative changes. I apologise, that was a very long-winded answer.
Thank you. Councillor Nair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question and a newbie again. In terms of these changes, if I look at the way I'm looking at it, this is the CE legislative changes. We have a right to be informed. I don't know whether we have a right to be informed either because it's something happening with the council by legislation. I would assume that it should be raised to us if there is an element of objection to something being done and the elected member says, well, this is against the legislation, and that's the time we can get in there. But in terms of the policy changes, is it any worth to us to get all these changes presented to us? I just wonder, because we can't give any input, we can't any object to it, and this is something which the CE is responsible to the mayor, and why we should get into this, may I ask? Knowing what the legislative changes are and CE's functioning.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
The value we are getting.
I'm responsible to the council.
Yes.
Council delegates to me.
Yeah.
And then I sub-delegate to staff. Yes. So that's why you need to be across it, and that's why this has been brought to you.
But what I'm trying to say, there are hundreds of changes happening in legislation as far as you're concerned. Does it matter to us? Unless we can put any input in it, it is something for your functioning. And yes, if there is an objectionable change, you can bring it to us and you say, well, we want to go back to the legislation and say, well, this is not acceptable. But otherwise, I don't see much reason in presenting policies per se without going through all these changes, which are of no relevance to us.
Part of the process, we have to pass it on.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. So we, as an intelligent council, we should come out and find ways and means to cut the tape. where we are just wasting our time on things which have not.
Discussing legislative changes here that need to be passed through the council. It's quite simple.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's just,
a long process,
it
councillor.
should be just as a resolution and changes noted and on. Thank you. I'm seeking your input. Is it possible at all, or is it we just have to live with it?
So through the chair, this is the result of a review. The whole idea is, the whole idea is that this will be brought to council now, and then thereafter we can administer the revised delegations that desperately need to tidy up. And so then we don't have to come back to council all the time. That is the outcome of that. That's the intended outcome of the process.
That's a short circuit in itself.
Actually, could not be the case potentially that if we haven't got our delegations properly sorted out and someone disagrees with a decision that's been made under delegated authority, the council could be liable for a judicial review cost, being sued.
Okay, thank you. I think that's probably well explained. Let's move on. Thank you. Shireen, there's nothing further for you to present?
Nope.
Okay.
Further questions?
This here.
What's that?
Good to know.
To be presented by Mark Schreers and Anand Nama.
It's summarized.
We'll just sort the tea, we'll just sort the tea out.
Is that Mr. Google getting involved?
Elected members, before we start this item, I just want to mention I am meeting with Councillor Howard with the Surf Club on Monday. So ahead of that, we won't comment on any matters pertaining to that meeting in advance of that meeting. And we're happy to have a conversation, PEC's agenda about the options there.
I wasn't listening.
It's okay.
A meeting with who?
Surf Club.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Oh,
No, just one.
We'll just get Alana
to get things geared up.
Where's that going?
Meeting IT guru.
Could we possibly just take a 2-minute break?
Can we take 2 minutes just so we can sort out the tech?
Sure. You want to have a cup of tea?
2-minute break?
Got break there. While we got ourselves geared up for the next item, which is the process for making a Mangawhai Heads Reserve concept plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bring this paper to you, which is a follow-on conversation that we've had with elected members regarding the surf club area in particular. But just by way of background, the Mangawhai Heads actually does have a Mangawhai Coastal and Harbour Reserve Management Plan. And we have spoken to council about doing a specific concept plan for the heads only. This paper largely talks about the process and timeframe. And what we would like to discuss in a little bit of detail is the indicative timeframe, and in particular the next steps that officers will go away and report back in July following the outcome or following the direction of this meeting. So the proposal, Mr. Mayor, is to get some initial community engagement, and noting that these timeframes are indicative, and we will try and accelerate where possible. And there may be a follow-on conversation of the timeframe in our PEC session that CE Maris alluded to. But we want to do that during July through to October. We'll come and present back to elected members with a workshop, initial outcomes of that. And that process will be iterative between July and November, noting that some stage between July and November, we will be bringing back what the initial community thoughts are. We do have to consult in accordance with the Local Government Act. So we propose to do that in the summer of 24-25, noting that we're getting close to December, January over that period as well. Following any feedback from that consultation process, we will amend the concept plan, and that's planned for early in 2025, with the option to bring a final plan back to elected members for adoption in April 25. So noting that, that the timeframe is indicative, and we will aim to accelerate that as much as we can, but we are sort of governed by public consultation inputs, and obviously there's drafting and elected member feedback and workshops thereafter. Just noting the next steps, Mr. Mayor, there are two in the paper. One is obviously seek direction from elected members here today, but whether elected members wish to have a small subcommittee of council for officers to work along, or bring the matter back to full council. And following that direction, today we aim to bring a paper back the July council meeting for decision. So open to any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions, Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on what is presented, Anin, there is something, the surf club slip and the lease, they are being worked on, haven't been decided. The lease haven't been decided yet. So do you think it's worthwhile looking at this plan separate from negotiations going on? Because I think what was presented to us is, do we spend the money on fixing the slip? Do they spend $1 million? Do the council funds are put in LTP for that slip remediation? Or we should put funds, I guess, in LTP for this new reserve plan? So is it wise? Is it something very urgent to be decided soon? And if so, why?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have got funds in the LTP for.
Can you be a bit loud? I think I'm getting deaf. I'm following.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's two questions there, and I'll defer one to our Chief Executive. But with respect to funding of the concept, that funding is available and put into the LTP. In terms of the lease, CE Maris did outline the process that we'll go through in terms of this paper and a conversation that we'll have in PEX.
So there are two separate things happening.
Well, there are really, and some of it's to be discussed in PEX. later on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a question to answer? No, okay. Other questions? Councillor Howard.
I'm not sure whether this should all just be left actually to PEX. But I've got a couple of queries, just so we've got absolute clarity going ahead, because we know that timelines are a key factor for the surf club. Put that out there. So, I mean, I have a couple of queries, and the way that the process goes, as we've defined, we've got two factors of consultation. So I'm wondering whether that could be done as one. You know, i.e. we come up with a plan and then we take it to community. That's a time saver. It's really the biggest is the biggest factor, and because I think that at the end of the day, Surf Club and Surf Life Saving New Zealand will be looking, I expect, to us to move things as fast as we possibly can. So just, you know, I just put it out there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the Chief Executive and myself, Senior Maris, have been in discussions with the Surf Club, and as the Chief Executive outlined at the start of the meeting, we would like to have that conversation further discussed in the PEC session. This is really just giving an overview of the process that we want to follow, and whether elected members choose today to set up a subcommittee or bring it back to full council after plan.
Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think it's a good approach going ahead. I think there's plenty of time in there to get it done. I guess my initial reaction would be I'd like to, probably a little bit like Councillor Howard, like to get it done sooner rather than later, so long as we do it properly and we can run two consultation processes in parallel or whatever. I think that the idea of having a working group or something to be able to get people together more easily and get through that drafting and what have you, whilst full council having sign off on the whole thing, that probably would be worthwhile thinking about, but that's a council meeting anyway, not for a briefing, but yeah.
Councillor Nair.
Yeah, can I just make a quick statement?
Sure.
Yeah, just that I don't read much newspaper, but it comes in Google. I think the neighboring council, Auckland Council, is facing music from Ombudsman based on too many decisions done under public excluded meetings. So I'm just kind of scared that maybe we should not go the same way. Maybe we should be more open to public in terms of our decisioning, because I think we have gone to private excluded many times in my living memory. Maybe there is a limit. Maybe Mr. Morris can explain. Is it in line with the other council? Because it's very scary if you're actually reviewed as a new council by them.
No, that's fine. And I understand that. So through you, Mr. Mayor, so we are actually one of the most open and transparent councils in the country. Matter of fact, we have a very vigorous and rigorous process around when we do discuss things in public excluded. And there are quite a few numbers of items discussed in public excluded when compared with our colleagues around the country. I am very aware of the Ombudsman's advice in that space, and also aware that a council has, down the line, has ignored that advice and agreed to do something differently as well. So I am very comfortable with our process, and what we do discuss in PEX is relevant. This particular topic is important because we have a duty of care to the Surf Club, and our approach here would be to talk to them first prior to talking about them in public. And that's why we want to have that particular conversation as far as the consideration for you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Okay, I don't think there's a lot more to discuss. We can go through to PEX later on. So I'll bring this matter to, councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to just give some direction or opinion on the process. And I just wonder, I'm not completely opposed to a subcommittee, but I would like, I think it would be important that there are touch points with the full council throughout the process though. Like I wouldn't like to go away like the district plan has and be all done with a subcommittee and then arrive at the end. There needs to be touch points so that the full council is still across the process. And then that will help hopefully have an ease of adoption at the end of the process.
That's really, Mr. Mayor, we can build that into the timeline, bring it back in.
Another timeline? Okay, thank you. Councillor Vincent?
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just to add my feedback, I actually quite like you're never going to get it right with the public consultation process, but you have got 2 different times of year. The stuff happening over the Christmas period, people often have other things on their mind than providing formal feedback to council on issues. I think on this one, it's a good time to have that, and that would also be backed up by the previous round of consultation taking place. And as for whether it's a working party or whatever, I would like to see in any recommendation that comes forward, these advantages and disadvantages of each one.
Thank you. Any further statements, questions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is the KDC organisation program. Morris will present this item.
And thank you. Just while she's coming up, Mr. Mayor, so what we'll do is we'll bring a report to the council meeting on that previous item, and we'll recommend I just want to get terminology right. It'd be a working group, I think, because all decision making is with council. Update during briefings as necessary.
Welcome, sir.
Bishop, all right. So as you'll be aware, we've been through quite a significant period of change that's actually been going on for nearly a year. Organisation-wide new functional review and restructure, and now we're into the NTA of those staff and those functions into the proper KDC structure. So to keep you up to date with how those things are tracking, the plan is to bring you a report or a discussion paper each briefing so that you have the opportunity to explore what you'd like to explore from those processes. Today's one is more high level, just so that we can understand we were looking at things from today. You probably have lots of questions, that's absolutely fine. But if we get going with this, I'm sure they will come to light. Oops, there we go. Right, so this is the KDC org change that we actually started in June last year with a staff survey that identified the need to do things differently. The roadmap in front of you here is just to help guide you as to where we are in our process with that. Now, all change processes have a beginning, a middle, an end, and then a tail. So the embedding piece over on the far right in green is where we are at this point in time. To give you an understanding of the colours, so the purple are things that we've done and dusted. Orange are the things that we are doing, and they will stretch across what we've been doing in the last period and into this tail period. And then the green is all related to how we are embedding our changes within the organisation. So the new structure went live 2 days ago on Monday. From that restructure, we only have 6 vacant positions left, which is a really outstanding result, given that we've for years have felt it was difficult to attract people. Actually, we've done a really stellar job in attracting people to council. And council has been perceived as an attractive place to work, which is really excellent too. So really happy with that. We do have 1 general manager position that's still technically vacant. So we have our previous infrastructure services general manager stepping into this role for the next 3 months to hold it steady while we progress with some more recruitment. We have had a look for that particular role and are now undertaking more of a search intensive process. So we've just stepped it up a level to get the right person. That role is particularly tricky because you've got to have a really good mix of infrastructure, roading and waters, but also be able to operate at council level. So it is quite a tricky role to fill. And we have a range of ongoing activities to support the staff in their new positions, whether that be understanding their workflows, understanding their accountabilities, providing them with training that they need to be successful in their role, and also just monitoring how they're progressing and how they're feeling as they go through. When we feel we've embedded most of that change, we will run we being the new HR manager, will run an engagement survey to understand the success of the process and the outcome as well. Any questions on the KDC piece?
So do we have it in our, couldn't see it.
We can make sure that you have a copy. You should have it.
Oh, it was in the presentations.
In a different.
We got sent.
Yeah, it's a slightly different email, councillor.
Oh, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I can send it to you after this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No questions on KDC? Okay, let's move on. Oops, let's not do that. All that way, let's go that way. All right, so this one looks a little messier because we've a lot of intensive activity happening in the roading space for us at the moment and a very condensed time frame in terms of the process. So this one looks a little busier, and this is where, you know, I would say at least 80% of our transition activities are happening at this point in time.
Actually, can I have a question, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sarah, you've talked about, and it's good to hear, that KDC is a place that people are happy to work with. How have you got on with people wanting to move?
So we haven't come across any issues. So we have attracted a couple of candidates who currently live on the north side of Auckland, and one in particular has he is moving his family up to the district. We are close enough to Auckland that it's really not considered an issue, and in fact it's a bit of a lifestyle improvement for many people. So we've attracted most people who are either in the district or prepared to move here. So it hasn't been an issue for us.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. So on with the roading change. So the new maintenance contract also went live on Monday. It's been a very busy Monday for us at council. As you'll be aware, we're transitioning to a mixed model rather than a fully integrated NTA model. We are currently in consultation with our NTA seconded staff, and that consultation period finishes at the end of today. So at the end of today, we'll have got all their feedback on the proposal, and we'll move into the chief executive for us. Obviously, Jason and also the other councils will move into a decision point in the next few days. We've had good feedback, just so you're aware. We have very engaged staff at NTA, and they've given us excellent feedback so far, and I'm very confident that we're going to end up with something that works really well for us. For the NTA transition, this has got an immediate tail of a couple of months, just while we unwrap some of the things that we've been doing collectively amongst the councils. 2 months is pretty standard when you're demobilising an organisation, so I'm comfortable with that. And as at Monday, the NTA brand is being retired. Any questions on, there's a lot to read in that chart, so I appreciate that, but are there any questions that anyone has?
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have one. That is, in terms of communicating exactly where this process is at, including new contractor and timeline for that, Sarah, so that the community has clarity on what is happening.
Sure. So I'm currently working with our GM service delivery, Arnon, on that entire process. We're just getting that maintenance contracts up and going, but there'll be the communication that is required from now on. So at the moment, it's about the staff, and we can't really do much until we've got a decision. But at that point in time, I'll work with Arnon on how we communicate that broadly beyond council.
Okay. I mean, I don't know about others, but I've certainly had inquiries from the community about what is happening is, do we have a new contractor, you know, like that, and what and when are we able to say things?
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll cover that in the PEC session as well, if that's okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So where's Sarah?
So Sarah, apart from being in front of you at this point in time, I am your transition or council's transition manager while we get through both of these phases, and likely to at this point be around for the next sort of 4 or 5 months, just to get us through this piece.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right, lunchtime.
What time do you want to come back, Mr. Mayor?
What do you suggest? It's 12:26, 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock's fine.
2 minutes late.
1 o'clock. Back on.
26, that's what it is now.